Think your state is secure from transformation? Reconsider. What if the forthcoming significant shift isn't about politics or the environment, but rather international relations? Some United States territories are already behaving more like Canada than America. They consume Tim Hortons coffee, apologize excessively, and even support the Maple Leafs hockey team. However, the connection runs deeper than mere stereotypes. These states have interconnected economies, share borders, and hold values similar to their northern neighbors. With increasing divisions within the U.S., the notion of secession no longer seems like science fiction. Would your state benefit from aligning with Canada? Let's delve into the 10 U.S. states that might find a better fit under the maple leaf. We'll examine the economic ties, cultural similarities, and political leanings that make these states unique candidates for a potential northern shift. Stay tuned as we explore these fascinating connections, and we'll share our conclusions at the end of the video. The world stage is constantly shifting, with numerous events capturing global attention. From geopolitical tensions to economic fluctuations, there's no shortage of developments. Amidst this complexity, we're focusing today on a particularly intriguing trend closer to home: the subtle, yet growing Canadian influence on certain U.S. states. Before we dive deeper, if you find this analysis insightful, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button. Your support is crucial for helping us bring these stories to light and reach a wider audience. Number 10. Washington. It experiences so much rainfall here that residents often jest, "The sun is a mere legend." Yet, beyond the overcast skies and verdant landscapes, a peculiar phenomenon is unfolding. Washington, the hub of tech behemoths and coffee aficionados, is increasingly leaning northward in multiple aspects. With annual trade exceeding $22 billion with Canada and thousands of residents traversing the border each year, this state might already resonate more with Canadian identity than American. Vancouver is geographically closer than many major U.S. cities, and culturally, the regions are practically kindred spirits. But here's the truly significant point. Over 68% of Washingtonians voted in alignment with Canadian-style policies in recent elections. You might be astonished by how frequently their values parallel those of provinces such as British Columbia. What transpires when economic boundaries blur, cultural distinctions fade, and all that remains is a dotted line on a map? Ask yourself, would anyone truly notice if this state quietly changed allegiances? Please make sure to watch this video until the very end, as we will be drawing important conclusions. Number 9. Oregon. Here, attendants pump your gasoline for you, a distinctive Oregonian practice. That's characteristic of Oregon: unconventional, autonomous, and subtly Canadian. Investigate further, and you'll uncover something more profound. Over 80% of Oregon's exports are destined for Canada, and this trade encompasses more than just timber and wine. It includes concepts, ways of life, and even legislative approaches. Oregon was among the pioneering states to authorize assisted dying, mirroring Canada's stance. They safeguard forests, allocate funds for healthcare, and advocate for inclusive policies. However, consider this. That's not even the most startling aspect. Canada has previously conducted public forums regarding the integration of new territories. If a segment of the Pacific Northwest were to drift across the border, Oregon would likely be at the forefront of this movement. Does this seem improbable? Just last year, several counties explored the possibility of realignment discussions. While the border remains a legal demarcation, the connection is cultural, economic, and emotional. Thus, we must inquire: is Oregon already effectively halfway to becoming part of Canada? Number 8. California. It stands as the world's 5th largest economy independently. That's not a nation. We're still discussing a single U.S. state: California. But here lies the unexpected turn. This sun-drenched, expansive giant might already be operating under its own set of rules. In Canada, it has been observing closely. You would be amazed at the depth of the connections. Over $44 billion in annual trade link California to Canada, and it's not confined to goods. Climate initiatives, cultural exchanges, and cooperative efforts are all integral components of this relationship. California has established independent environmental pacts with Canadian provinces like British Columbia and Quebec. This isn't federal-to-federal interaction. It's state-to-province engagement. When California encounters resistance from Washington, D.C., who do they consult next? Ottawa. Now contemplate this. Both British Columbia and California have enacted ambitious carbon reduction laws, championed healthcare reforms, and invested heavily in green technology. Not only do they share similar perspectives, but they also strategize alike. In fact, back in 2018, California's governor at the time was described by a Canadian minister as being more Canadian than some Canadians. That statement isn't merely complimentary, it's indicative of future possibilities. But there's another layer: the culture. In areas of Northern California, Canadian brands and tourists integrate seamlessly. Canadians possess property here, make investments here, and even work remotely from here. The distinction between neighbor and partner is dissolving. And if the U.S. were ever to face internal shifts, do you genuinely believe California wouldn't weigh its alternatives? Could the Golden State exchange its stars for a maple leaf? Perhaps not immediately, but ask yourself, is it already partially there? Number 7. Vermont. It's serene, green, almost excessively tranquil. But beneath the surface of covered bridges and mountain hamlets, something unforeseen is developing. Vermont might just represent the most Canadian state within the U.S., and this isn't solely attributable to maple syrup. Here's a fact you likely weren't aware of. Vermont previously attempted to join Canada. Yes, genuinely. During the 1860s, there were explicit discussions about annexation. Fast forward to the present day, and the concept doesn't appear quite so far-fetched. Culturally, Vermont reflects Quebec's progressive values and Nova Scotia's small-town warmth. Its population? Just over 640,000, smaller than most Canadian cities. In recent electoral cycles, nearly 70% of voters supported policies more congruent with Ottawa than Washington. Then there's the matter of health care. Vermont endeavored to implement a single-payer system. Sound familiar? That's essentially Canada's hallmark system. The initiative faltered, not due to lack of desire, but because the state was too diminutive to execute it independently. Imagine if that weren't the case. Even economically, Vermont aligns with the Canadian model. Small-scale agriculture, clean energy, sustainable forestry. It's practically a province in disguise. And let's not overlook geography. Montreal is nearer to Vermont's capital than Boston is. Cross the border, and you encounter bilingual signage, amiable customs officials, and a rhythm that feels curiously familiar. So, ask yourself, if it already behaves like a Canadian entity and communicates like one, what's preventing it? Number 6. Massachusetts. They assert that the revolution originated here. The tea, the protests, the fervor. But more than 2 centuries later, Massachusetts might be nearing another quiet uprising. And this time, its focus is northward. You'd be astonished by how much this historical state resonates with Canadian ideals in 2025. Firstly, the policies. Universal health care, Canada's foundational principle. Massachusetts came close. It already leads the U.S. in health coverage, with over 97% of residents insured, thanks to its own system established long before the Affordable Care Act existed. Education? Massachusetts ranks number 1 in the U.S. for public schools, often comparable to Ontario's system. In fact, Canadian education specialists examine Massachusetts as a standard. But the parallels don't end with schools or hospitals. The state has vigorously promoted climate action, clean energy, and social equity, directly aligning with Canada's national objectives. A 2023 study indicated that Massachusetts cities scored higher on Canadian value indicators than some provinces within Canada itself. That's not merely surprising, it's historic. And here's what often goes unnoticed. It's not just about values, it's geography. Drive from Boston to Montreal, and you'll arrive in under 5 hours. Cross the border, and it's akin to entering a cultural relative's domain. In fact, over 1 million Canadians visit Massachusetts annually. Many own property, operate businesses, even attend schools there. The flow of individuals, concepts, and currency is relentless. But consider this. There's even discussion. Quiet, intellectual murmurs that amidst future global uncertainties, the New England bloc could forge a tighter alliance with Canada. Not conspiracy, but strategy. So, here's the question. If a state's values, policies, and even populace align so closely with Canada, how American is it, truly? Number 5. Michigan. Traverse one bridge, and the accent subtly transforms. Welcome to Michigan, the state possessing a literal handshake link to Canada. But here's the aspect most people overlook. That handshake? It's strengthening. Michigan shares 721 miles of border with Canada, exceeding almost any other state. Detroit and Windsor? They're essentially twin cities, divided by a river and a passport requirement. Over $70 billion in trade cross that boundary annually, establishing it as one of the most active economic corridors between the U.S. and Canada. Yet the connection surpasses monetary value. This is a state known for manufacturing, much like Ontario. Automotive production? Shared. Steel and technology? Shared. Joint emergency response teams even exist between the two countries for the Great Lakes region. You'd be amazed how synchronized their systems are. And let's discuss values. Michigan voters endorsed protections for abortion access, legalized marijuana, and allocated billions to clean energy, all within the past 5 years. Sound recognizable? This trajectory closely mirrors Canada's federal direction. In fact, in a 2024 Regional Values Survey, 52% of Michiganders indicated a preference for Canadian-style healthcare over the current U.S. system. That's not insignificant. It's substantial. And don't forget identity. Upper Peninsula residents often humorously remark they feel disconnected from the rest of the country. But inquire about Canada, and you'll hear tales of weekend excursions to Thunder Bay, fishing with relatives across the border, or purchasing more affordable medications from Ontario pharmacies. It's not merely neighborly, it's personal. So, what occurs if circumstances shift again in America? What happens if people begin viewing the North not as tourists, but as prospective citizens? Number 4. Wisconsin. There's an essence tied to frozen lakes, early morning angling, and that small-town cordiality that just feels familiar. And if it slightly evokes Canada, you're not mistaken. Wisconsin might be clad in red, white, and blue, but examine closely, and you'll discern maple leaves subtly woven into its fabric. You'd be surprised how often this Midwestern state aligns with its northern counterpart. With over $9 billion in annual commerce with Canada, Wisconsin's economy significantly relies on cross-border connections, particularly in dairy, paper, and manufacturing sectors. Certain companies in locations like Green Bay and Eau Claire depend more on Canadian associates than on U.S. suppliers just a few states away. It's not about proximity, it's about compatibility. And here's what might truly astonish you. Wisconsin occupies the same latitude as parts of Ontario and Manitoba. Indeed, Madison lies further north than Toronto. It's no surprise winters here feel more Canadian than American. But the similarity extends beyond weather. It includes values, too. Recent data reveals an increasing majority of Wisconsinites support expanded healthcare access, clean energy initiatives, and social programs. Ring a bell? That closely follows Canada's policy structure. In fact, in a 2024 state policy comparison survey, Wisconsin ranked among the top 5 U.S. states most congruent with Canadian governance. Coupled with a culture centered around close-knit communities, progressive farming methods, and profound respect for public services, it's easy to see why. And let's consider the border. Thousands of Wisconsinites journey into Ontario and Manitoba each year for leisure, commerce, or even routine healthcare acquisitions. Some northern towns even legally sell Canadian goods due to high local demand. So the question arises, if your politics, climate, economy, and lifestyle already mirror another nation, how long until your identity follows suit? Number 3. New York. Skyscrapers, Wall Street, dazzling lights. Yes, we recognize the brand. But away from the skyline and the relentless pace, New York possesses another dimension, one not typically shown on television, one that is quietly drawing nearer to Canada than most comprehend. Here's the headline you didn't anticipate. New York conducts more trade with Canada than with any other foreign nation, exceeding $35 billion annually. This isn't sporadic commerce. It's a vital economic conduit. With over 500 miles of shared border, including 4 principal land crossings and the renowned Peace Bridge, this relationship isn't merely adjacent. It's structural. You'd be amazed at the depth of this integration. In places like Buffalo and Plattsburgh, Canadian enterprises own factories, real estate, and manage supply chains. Niagara Falls, it's practically shared territory. And with Toronto merely a brief drive away, some New Yorkers spend more weekends northward than downstate. But here's where the situation takes a significant turn. Values. In 2023, New York enacted one of the nation's most assertive climate action laws, nearly verbatim mirroring sections of Canada's federal framework. Social programs? Expanding. Minimum wage? Increasing. Public transit? Developing, akin to models in Montreal and Vancouver. These aren't mere similarities, they represent convergence. Culturally, too, there's overlap. Upstate New York towns host dual citizenship festivals, and numerous residents have relatives directly across the border. Language, media, fashion, even preferred hockey teams. These distinctions blur in the borderlands. A study from 2022 discovered that 1 in 6 upstate New Yorkers identified more strongly with Canadian values than with those of southern U.S. states. So here's the pivotal query. If the bridge is already constructed, who dictates the direction it leads? Number 2, Connecticut. It's refined, understated, almost imperceptible on a map dominated by larger states and bolder headlines. But Connecticut isn't merely sipping lattes and observing hedge funds. It's discreetly aligning itself with something unexpected. And that something might just bear a red maple leaf. You'd be astonished by the commonalities this compact state shares with Canada. Economically, it's a hub for insurance, biotechnology, and green technology. Industries already fostering robust partnerships with Ontario and Quebec. In 2024 alone, Connecticut's trade with Canada surpassed $3.2 billion, and this figure is escalating. However, the real transformation isn't numerical, it's in priorities. Consider healthcare. Connecticut boasts one of the lowest uninsured rates in the U.S. and persists in broadening care access through publicly funded alternatives. The state also upholds some of the nation's highest educational standards, frequently ranked alongside, not beneath, Canadian provinces regarding literacy and academic achievements. The values here? Virtually parallel. And it's not confined to policy. It encompasses culture. In towns such as Stamford, Hartford, and even New Haven, you'll find Canadian firms integrated into tech parks and financial districts. Shared academic research projects thrive between Yale and Canadian universities. There's even a noticeable migration of Canadian retirees selecting tranquil Connecticut towns for secondary residences, attracted by the climate, healthcare accessibility, and lifestyle pace. Here's what renders this state particularly unique: its capacity to meld seamlessly into any framework. If political climates evolve, if economic alliances solidify, if identity ever becomes uncertain, Connecticut could transition quietly and effortlessly, not out of rebellion, but out of readiness. So, ask yourself, could one of the smallest states in the U.S. be poised to make one of the most significant shifts? Number 1, Montana. It's rugged, vast, untamed. But beyond the peaks and expansive plains, Montana is quietly forging one of the most intriguing cross-border connections in America. And most are unaware. Montana doesn't just share a border with Canada. It feels intrinsically linked. With over 540 miles of shared boundary, this state possesses more direct crossings with Canada than nearly any other. In numerous remote locales, towns on opposite sides rely on each other more than their own distant state capitals. You'd be surprised how frequently border residents casually mention trips to Alberta for various needs. And it's not merely the locals. Montana engages in billions of dollars worth of trade with Canada, particularly in energy, lumber, and agriculture. Certain regions depend on Canadian infrastructure for power and water distribution. In fact, Cross-border emergency services are already coordinated. It's not theoretical, it's operational. Even the economy aligns. Canada's appreciation for natural resources and environmental stewardship perfectly mirrors Montana's identity. Culturally, hunting, fishing, ranching, self-sufficiency, check, check, check. These aren't just neighbors, they are reflections. In a 2024 regional value poll, over 60% of Montanans expressed preference for local governance over federal control, and nearly 1 in 5 reported feeling more connected to Alberta than to the East Coast. Think that's insignificant? It's not. So imagine this. You reside in a town nearer to Calgary than your own state capital. Your daily existence intertwines with Canadian roots. Your goods are priced in both currencies, and your values resonate more with a province across the line than a city across the country. At what juncture do you simply consider it home? So, there we have it. 10 U.S. states potentially closer to Canada than anyone might have predicted. From the Pacific Northwest to the rugged terrain of Montana, from the polished charm of New England to the economic bridges spanning the Great Lakes, one reality is undeniable. Borders aren't merely lines on a map, they represent ideas. And some of those ideas are beginning to shift. Perhaps it's driven by trade, maybe by culture, possibly by the subtle attraction of shared values. Whatever the catalyst, the question persists. If these states already think like Canada, cooperate with Canada, and live like Canada, then what is truly anchoring them as American? If you found this exploration thought-provoking, please do us a favor. Subscribe, like, and share this video. Let's encourage more people to ask the significant questions, recognize the underlying connections, and contemplate beyond the conventional boundaries. This narrative is far from concluded, and neither are the stories we aim to share. What are your thoughts on these blurring lines? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you for joining us on this journey.